Welcome back to the Knick-Knack Review. I am your host, Clint the Knick-Knack, and today we're talking about What If, Episode 1. Let's get started. So What If is a show about the same stories we all know and love from the MCU, except with a little bit of a twist. What if this particular event happened to this particular character instead of this particular character? This concept is based off of the comic book What If that was published in 1977 that took a lot of these popular stories and gave them a little twist. What if this person didn't die? What if this person survived? What if these bad guys actually won in this particular storyline? For example, we have in episode 1, Peggy Carter. What if she got the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers? This episode plays out much like Captain America, the First Avenger, but with some obvious differences. Like for instance, Bucky, when he's on the train, like with him and Cap, this time with Peggy, he doesn't fall off the train and he doesn't lose his arm. Now, I don't want to give a lot away. However, there are a lot of instances where things like that happen. You have the same scene, but a different outcome. Every outcome will be very different because you have Peggy where Steve once was, so that makes it automatically different, but they'll do things differently. Instead of going that way, they go that way.
That means I go this way and you go this way.
I go that way, you go this way.
Yes.
There are plenty of recognizable moments in this show. There was this one scene that actually reminded me, it gave me some vibes of Stargirl and Stripes. It really reminded me of that. It was really cool to see a lot of these scenes recreated with Peggy because you have a different outcome. For instance, she has a different fighting style than Steve, so automatically you get a completely different experience. Still action-packed, but completely different. Now, I have to talk about the animation. I think the animation was actually really good. It reminded me of the traditional animation with your detail and everything of, say, maybe the 80s, 90s type of animation, maybe early 2000s, but sandwiched on top was CGI computer animation. And I will say there was this one scene where Peggy was fighting these guys, and it kind of gave me some Pixar vibes. Not necessarily a bad thing because it was meant to be a little bit comedic. However, I was like, okay, now I'm starting to see Pixar in the entire show. Again, not a bad thing, but it did kind of throw me off a bit. I actually do approve of this animation because it is not exactly traditional animation, but thankfully it's not the computer animation that makes the anatomy of the people completely off, like something like The Incredibles. It's not trying to be The Incredibles. It's not trying to be anything in Pixar at all. It is completely its own thing, and I think it works well for the MCU. Another credit I have to give is to the cast. Now, unfortunately, not all the cast that voiced their popular characters will be returning in this show. Case in point, Chris Evans. He does not return to voice Steve Rogers, and the guy does really, really well voicing Steve Rogers. However, it's Chris Evans. We all know him as Captain America and Steve Rogers, and to not hear that recognizable voice, it throws you off a little bit, but as the story goes on, you kind of get used to it. Now, one thing this show does, it officially introduces the Watcher. Uatu the Watcher he kind of gives his backstory very briefly in the beginning of the show, but basically he comes from a different planet, and his entire race are known as the Watchers. And what they do is, they observe and record history throughout the multiverse. So you will have a Watcher here and a Watcher there. They're literally... they literally are just watching everything you're doing, and it's like, I'm not here, pretend I'm not here, you don't see me. But they never interfere. At least they claim to not ever interfere, because there are some instances in the comic books, like when Galactus first appeared in Fantastic Four, Uatu the Watcher came out of nowhere, and he's like, oh, hey, dude, okay, look, I've been watching this whole thing going on. I'm not supposed to interfere, but Galactus is coming. But what I'm getting at is that I'm really hoping that since they've introduced Uatu the Watcher, I really hope in the show, I really hope that they bring him into the actual MCU live action. This way, this show can actually get people familiar with him, even though he doesn't have a big presence in this show. He's basically in the beginning and the end credits. I feel that they will remember this character, and so let's say Secret Wars or something in the future comes out, and he's a part of it. Ooh, they know who he is already. So I think that was actually smart, not, and this is actually comic book accurate because Uatu would actually tell the stories in the comic book. So I do like that little nod to the actual comic books. I really hope they get to utilize this character in a live action appearance at some point, and I don't believe he's going to actually be live action. I honestly believe he's going to be a really somewhat of a big CGI character, but I'm okay with that. I really like this concept of this animated show because it takes these well-known stories that if you watch the MCU, you've known all these stories. You've probably seen the movies more than once. It takes these stories and spins it and gives a fresh new take on it. It's almost kind of like it gives a reboot to all these very well-known stories and allows you to watch it in a completely different way, but yet still enjoyable. This is also one of those shows you do not have to watch any of the other Disney Plus shows like Loki, WandaVision, any of those, and you don't have to watch them in order to enjoy this show. This literally stands completely by itself, and that's why I feel like they're going to utilize the Watcher in the future. Although if you haven't watched any of those shows, I highly recommend you do. That way you can go watch some of my reviews on it. All in all, I think this is a great idea for a show. It's quite unique, and it takes, again, all these stories that we know and love and puts a fresh spin on it, and you get a lot of these voice actors that are coming back to their original roles that made them famous, and I heard that you will get Chadwick Boseman for his last performance ever in the MCU. Well, that about does it for me, guys. Let me know what you thought in the comments below about episode 1. Let me know what you're hoping to see in the MCU What If. And if they continued the show on to season 1, 2, 3, whatever it is, what ideas would you like to see? What ifs would you like to see? And while you're there, don't forget to, well, you know what to do. As always, I am Clint the Knickknack, and I will see you on the next one.